Emmett and Audra, we often hear the word conflict. Give us a definition of what that means.
Okay, basically what Webster says conflict is to be, as a verb, is to be in opposition to, and as a noun, it means to be in struggle with. And a lot of times when we look at conflict, we always look at conflict as a negative.
Yes.
It's always a negative connotation. It's always something that's bad. But a lot of people don't realize that conflict can be a push to help you move to the next stage. All it is making you uncomfortable in the place that you're at now. If you look at it that way, instead of looking at it as a bad thing, because if you're uncomfortable in the place that you are now, it can be a push to get you to somewhere else.
That's good. That's good.
It just depends on how you want to use it.
Yes, that's good. You know, as you mentioned the word conflict, feeling uncomfortable, let's say somebody watching right now has had some previous experience where it involved conflict, and now they're sort of staying away from that person they had conflict with. It's unresolved conflict.
Mm-hmm.
What impact can that have on a relationship and on the person?
It can have a really bad, thing on the person and the relationship. And if they're on a team, it can have a really bad impact on the team as well. Because if you let it fester, it can be like a cancer and eat up the team. It can spread to rumors and miscommunication and miscues and all of that when you're in a workplace environment.
What would you say? What are some practical examples that either maybe when you've been in conflict in the past, or you've seen others that started off very, very small, but led to conflict?
Well, for me, it's been working in team environments. Since I'm in the HR field, it's really interesting in HR. A lot of people think that the HR team doesn't have conflicts, but the HR team usually has the most conflicts, because a lot of times we have differences on how we should handle the human part of the resources department.
Right. Okay.
So we have conflict of how we may need to deal with an employee, or how we may need to deal with getting a goal moved forward and stuff. And a lot of times the HR department has a lot more conflict in it than what a lot of people think. We put on a united front because the profession that we're in, but a lot of times it comes down to us having issues trying to help other people, because we all want to help that person, but a lot of times we have a conflict of how we need to do it. And then our last resort always is if the person has to be let go, that's a really, really, really hard decision for the human resources department to make. And a lot of times we debate, go back and forth, debate, not unless it's something clear cut. If it's something that's a gray matter, I mean, we may go back and forth for weeks and weeks just trying to get all the facts and get all of the everything to make sure if we have to let somebody go, that is justified and that we did everything we possibly could before we had to make that decision.
Yes. So is it safe to say that conflict is very common, or is it something that a person would rarely experience?
It's a very common issue. It's a common thing, but conflict, it's like Audra says, it's sometimes good, it's sometimes bad, and without it, things do not get resolved. Issues do not get addressed, and people just can't move forward. They'll stay stuck on a spot because they cannot resolve the conflict at the time, or they just stay stuck because they just cannot move forward.
Either they won't let it go, or they're afraid to let it go, or if they, like when they get to my point where the conflict has gotten out of hand and they have to come to the HR professional. When they come to me, is at a place to where they don't want to hear each other anymore. They don't want to talk about it anymore. All they want is a resolution. And a lot of times in my point, they have to come to me and we have to talk about it some more so I can get the facts straight to help them resolve the conflict. So I'm like a judge and a lawyer at the same time, trying to help them get, and a doctor and a counselor. So you have to get all of those things. And even if you're in the management realm, like Emmett, he has teams and different personalities that he has to deal with. So then you really have to as a manager, if you have some of your residents who are going into a management role, you really have to take the time and learn your people so that if they have these little quirks, you'll be able to be flexible and move around to be able to get your team faceted together.
Okay, so one of the things I heard you both say was to really try to see things from the other person's point of view.
Yes.
To understand each person, to better understand their personality, their likes, their dislikes. Now, you mentioned that conflict is very common. Can you give us some examples of where conflict can actually be healthy?
So with me, we have a structure of how we do our jobs and procedures of how we do jobs. So when we have, let's just say one of my helpers comes in and says, hey, you know what? I have a different way of doing this. Okay. So right there, it's the verb to be in opposition of another person. So in that conflict between he and I, we are trying to figure out, okay, the way I want it done and the way you're proposing to get it done, well, let's come to a common ground. Let's try it and see what the result is. And then from the result, we resolve the conflict that we had. And you know, and that goes on with the other things also in my job. But I don't know. How about you, Audra?
Can you repeat the question so I can make sure I give a clear answer?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, often people connect the word conflict with negative, like we don't want to have conflict. I know sometimes like in business, or if you're trying to make an idea better, for example, sometimes conflict can actually produce something better. So do you feel like that is true? And can you possibly share an example where conflict could actually be a good thing if handled correctly?
It can be a good thing if it's handled correctly. For example, with the last position that I had, I was a contract worker in the oil and gas industry. And we had a conflict of how we needed to get people into the system when they were applying for jobs. So with that being said, I was a subject matter expert as far as looking at systems to get people into the hiring process. And we had opposition of everything, you know, the cost, how it was going to streamline into the payroll system. So I had to resolve each of those questions and conflicts and answer them to the best of my ability. And then we ended up going with a system. Then after we got the system, then we had to figure out, okay, we got the system now, how's it going to work and how are we going to get these people in and get them all the way through the process so then they have an outstanding hiring process and not a crappy one. So then I had to work on those conflicts, and then I had to balance the thing of my boss, what she wanted and what I knew based on, since I was the person who had worked in several different systems. I had worked in, by the time I had got to this position, like 8 different systems. So I had to balance what she wanted to what I knew to actually get it and collaborate more to be open to that.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like for somebody watching who maybe be a manager or wants to be a manager, part of the job is to manage conflict, but also to expect it. In other words, so many people, I think, get derailed by the smallest problem they face. But if you anticipate, hey, conflict is normal, it's part of relationships, it's how you handle it, I think people become better leaders. Would you agree with that?
I would. Like I said, it could be used for good or it could be used for evil. Yeah. So you have to really, if you're going into a management role, and I know Emmett can attest to this, you have to be open to the collaboration. You really do have to be open to it, because not everybody, because some of your residents, if they are going into a management role, they may have people who are older than them. My first job was a manager at Kroger, and I had people who had been at Kroger 40 years and I was their manager. So I had to be open to their tutelage, but I still had to maintain the management role there of my position. Hey, this is what I want done. But I couldn't just close it off to saying, because they had been there longer than me. They knew how the system worked, and I was a young manager. And by me opening up and letting them tutor me, you know, and taking what I could learn from them and glean from them, it helped me be a better manager overall. Would you say that?
Yep. I would. I agree.
Well, let me ask you both this. Let's
Mhm.
say that someone watching right now has an issue they need to address with someone.
Mhm.
Do you give them some tips in terms of how they should prepare, what they should say, and how they should conduct the conflict, just so they kind of give them a roadmap of what to do?
I'll give you what my roadmap is, and then Emmett's may be a little bit different because he's been more of in a owner manager role, and I've been in like a supportive team role.
Yes,
So
okay.
I'll give you what mine is. Usually, if I have a conflict with another person, I usually take a step back, and I may take some time to think about what the conflict was.
Okay.
Then I get a list of all the things that I need to talk about with this person. And so for me, because a lot of times I take HR so passionately,
Yeah.
I can get off on a tangent and just go, and get over emotional.
Right.
So for me, I have to write it down, cover my points, make sure that they're valid points. And I really have to look at that and see that is it coming from Audra where she's upset, or is it coming from Audra that this was a point of contention that we need to talk about?
It's a
So
great.
that's why I have to take a step back from it. Because
Yeah.
like I said, I'm very passionate about it. And if I feel like I'm right, I'm like a bulldog and I will bite and not let go of it. So I
Right.
have to take a step back, write it down, make sure I have my valid points, and then I schedule some time to talk to the person. Say, hey, I need to talk to you about this. And then a lot of times I have to read off of my paper and let them talk. Put yourself pause in there where they can talk so you can listen and write down whatever they're saying. Then repeat back to them what you thought you heard, because you might have not heard what they said.
Yes.
You might have wrote it down, but you read it back to them, that's like, no, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
So you have to, like for me, like I said, I have to take a step back and then write it down, then go to the person and talk to them about it. And then we work on it from there and see if we can come to some common ground. Some things you have to agree to disagree and let it go.
Yeah.
Not everything is a battle, not everything is a major contention, but sometimes you have to agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. And then work on the points that you can work on, that you and that person can come together on and work and build the relationship from there.
That's good. One of the takeaways from what you just said, I think, is to write down the problem, but also let cooler heads prevail.
Mm-hmm.
The emotions out and writing it down, even following your notes, can make sure it's a more deliberate conversation. That's great. Emmett, how about you? What would you add to that from your perspective?
I take it at a different approach.
See?
Well, I mean, it's almost the same. It's just that I don't do I'm not so disciplined with the writing down and taking notes. But I did give advice recently to a young man that one of the guys that worked for me about he was having a conflict at his home with his wife, and I tell him the thing is you got to listen to her. You need to stop. Don't let your emotions take over. Stop, listen to her, and then analyze what's going on between the two of you. But if you're two talking at the same time, yelling at the same time, you're never going to get anything done. Mm-hmm. And I approach the same thing with situations at work as well. I don't let my emotions take the best of me. If I have to, I'll walk outside and cool down, take a couple of deep breaths, go in and address the issue. I get the person I brought them outside, talk to them, hey, what's going on with you? And a lot of times it's something that's going on within their life personally. They cannot confront whoever they have the issue with, and they're taking it out on everybody else around them. And then I help them address it. But the key thing is listening to whoever you have issues with.
Okay. It sounds so simple, but I think listening is really, really the key. When somebody feels heard, then they feel appreciated.
Yes.
They feel understood. It's just some of the simple things that you said can actually help avoid conflict. But if there is, once it's resolved, do you find that if conflict is handled correctly, that it actually causes a better relationship with that person?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That is 100% a definite.
Yes.
Because just an example with some of my previous work that I've done before, where we've had conflict, and one of the young ladies, we talk to each other all the time now. I mean, we were on dead polar opposites of, but we agreed to disagree on certain points. And she let me handle my area expertise. I deferred to her on her area expertise. And I didn't go back. One thing with conflict, once you've worked it out, don't keep going back to it.
That's good.
Don't keep bringing it up. Don't keep putting it back in the other person's face that, hey, you did this, you did that. You really have to work on letting it go and agree what you're going to agree on and let the rest of it go. Like I said before, the one lady, she and we talk pretty regularly. I mean, now, and in the beginning, it was like, whew, I don't know how I'm gonna make it with this one. That's the way I felt, truly.
Okay.
And she was the subject matter expert for our HR generalist, and I had to learn to respect that, even though I have more time in HR than she did. What she was a subject matter expert on was second to none. She just knew her stuff. Yeah. And so when she learned that she could look at me as that I'm the top-notch recruiter, I know everything about recruiting. And once we agreed on them 2 points, we didn't have any more conflict after that.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because what you said, I think, can actually help a lot of marriages and relationships too. And that is, once you address it, then forget about it and move on. So many times, and I'm guilty of this as well, in an argument with my wife, you tend to bring the past back up and it always kind of burns you. That's really solid advice. Emmett, anything you would add to that?
No, I agree with both of you on that one.
Well, so let me ask you this. Let's say that, again, somebody watching has a conflict with someone. What environment is the best place for them to have that conversation with that person? Is it public? Is it private? Where should it be? Who should be in the room? And so forth.
It depends on the nature of the conflict. Okay. Just for me being in HR, depends on the nature of the conflict. If it was something that, they disagreed about schedule, they can just go over to wherever and talk about the schedule. Or if it's something that's small, but if it's something more serious, like harassment or sexual harassment and all of that, if it's something more serious than something serious on that nature, then that's when you need to bring in people who can actually help you get it remedied. Because if it's on harassment or sexual harassment or something really serious like that, they may be in fear of that this person may hurt them or something like that. So it all depends on the nature of the conflict. If it's something, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean to say that everybody's conflicts are small, but some of them are a little bit more on the conflict meter higher than,
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Okay. So in that, even though that wasn't the topic today, but in the case of sexual harassment or things like that, obviously it's best, I'm no expert there, but to talk with your boss, your supervisor, there's probably a protocol at the company. So I would encourage people to follow that protocol. Would you agree with that from an HR standpoint?
I would definitely agree with that. And then make sure that if they're going to talk about that, make sure that they write down instances, dates, times, that type of thing, because it's really hard when it's something of that nature, because I've been through that. Well, in a previous work environment, I've been through the sexual harassment portion of where it happened to me. And a lot of times it's really painful for the person to come forward and say something. Make sure that they write that stuff down, because then it's coming out of, this is what happened, here it is, instead of you trying to explain it emotionally, and then it's not coming across as, it's not coming across as something clear and concise that this needs to be dealt with. All it is just a big emotional mess. And sometimes some managers may look at it, well, this person is just being emotional, they're just crying, they're just this, they're just that, but they don't really realize that that's a trauma. And so if they're going through that, they really need to take some time and make sure that they have dates, times, places, and come to it to where they can talk to the person, and feel comfortable that that person has their back.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Let me ask you this. Why don't we take a step back and ask you, what are some steps people can take to avoid conflict in the first place? I mean, we know some conflict is unavoidable, but there are things that people can do in a relationship or a work environment
Mhm.
to not escalate things.
Communicate.
Communication is a big thing, you know, listening and respecting each other and
Mhm.
respecting each other's space.
Mhm.
You know, and the thing is as people, human beings, we have to realize is that what really builds conflict up is our pride. And
Yep.
if we can take a step down from that, you know, that would help out a lot. But, you know, pride is just, it's like the fizz in a soda pop. It's ready to pop anytime.
It's
Yeah.
funny because one time when we were going through marriage counseling, our pastor told us, he said, do you want to be right or do you want to be married?
Yes,
Think
yes,
about it. Do you want to be right or do
yes.
you want to be married? So, you know, really and truly, some things, like I said, you have to really listen and respect. And when I say listen, I don't mean when you talk. It means when you stop talking, you put down your phone, you turn it off, turn all the other stuff off, and you focus on what that person is saying. Because a lot of times when you don't focus on what they're saying, or they don't perceive that you're focusing on what they're saying, then they feel like you didn't hear them, they were disrespected or something. So really and truly, that phone, even though it's a great thing, it can be a bad thing, and I'm bad at it. So a lot of times if he and I talk, I have to put my phone away, another room, somewhere, because I have to focus on what he's saying because I'm phone.
Yeah, and I had to turn off the TV.
Yep.
I can relate to that. But as you were talking, what I was thinking about was, let's say that I'm a manager and I'm in my office and someone
Mhm.
comes to me with a concern.
Mhm.
I'm my back turned, I'm typing or I'm distracted. That conveys to people that they're not important, that I'm just not listening.
That you're
But
not open.
yeah, but if I physically stop, look at
Mhm.
them, even begin to take some notes and just be
Mhm.
present,
Mhm.
that can make them feel listened to and avoid a lot of conflict. And so I like what you both said. Really, it comes down to communication,
Mhm.
clear communication and listening, and kind of the golden rule of treating others like you want to be treated.
Yes.
Really and truly, you have to treat them better than what you want to be treated.
Ah, okay. That's good.
You
That's
really have to treat them better than that, because the way you want to be treated, you have a certain way you want to be treated. But if you treat them better than what you would treat yourself,
okay. So let's make this really personal. We've talked about some things in the workplace. Let's say that you and a good friend have a conflict. How do you talk to your friend about an issue that you're having?
You know, that's when that's kind of tough because, you know, it depends on the friend and the level of friendship, I guess. But when I was younger and I did have a lot of friends around me, you know, we had conflict all the time. And when I mean conflict, we just had differences of how we should handle things. And a lot of it did not get issued because we just didn't stop and talk about it.
Okay.
But now that I think about it, I wish that I had just stopped, addressed it, and you know, and talked through it with my friend, you know. And sadly to say, I'm not friends with that person anymore, and I wish I had been. And if I had, that maybe that conflict wouldn't have ripped us apart. But to do it differently, I would just talk to him, listen, address the issue, and then let's resolve it. Let's find a solution. It's, you know, and and always the solution has to be good for you, for both parties involved.
And for me, I'm a little different than in my professional HR thing. I usually come and tell you point blank that we got a problem. We need to talk. I'm very direct, and my friends know that I'm very direct, and my friends are very direct with me. For example, I had one tell me something and it hurt my feelings. She was telling me the truth and she was telling me what was right, but it hurt my feelings. But after I went back and licked my wounds a little bit, I came back and we talked, and, you know, we finished talking it out. But we have the mutual respect of each other to where we can say that to each other based on our level of friendship. I mean, we've been through some of everything. She's, been there for me when I got married. I was there for her when she had cancer. So, I mean, we're at that level to where we can just let it fly and we don't worry about, the feelings as far as certain things go, but like he said, you have to really sit there and talk about it. And everybody wants to have at least one friend that they can just bear it all to, and whether good or bad, and they can see the mess and they can help you clean up the mess, and they can be like, okay, time to straighten your face up, quit crying, let's go ahead and knock this out and do something different. So everybody needs at least one good friend like that.
Now, I'm in my mid-40s now, and I appreciate honesty more than anything, because if somebody isn't honest, if they're praising me, give me praise for something small, but I didn't do it right, I'd rather you tell me, hey, you should have did it this way, and that way the next time I go about doing it, I do it correctly.
Yeah, so false praise is not a way to avoid conflict. It can actually create bigger issues down the road.
Yes.
All right, so it's hard to discuss conflict without talking about how to apologize to somebody. When it comes to saying I'm sorry, when should you say I'm sorry, and how should you do it?
You should say you sorry when you actually mean you sorry. Don't say you sorry just because you felt you were beat into a corner.
Right, okay.
Don't, because it's not sincere. You don't really mean it, or you're just saying, okay, we need to get this argument over. I need to hurry up and say I'm sorry so we can keep it moving to something else. If you're not sorry, don't say you're sorry. Okay. Really don't. And then, like I said, like you said earlier about letting cooler heads prevail, sometimes you may have to take a step back and reflect on the conversation that just happened, or the argument that just happened, or the discussion that just happened. You may have to reflect on it and be brought to some realizations of your own after you had some time to reflect on it. But once you reflect on it and did some sort of analysis on it, normally you can come back to somebody and say, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry because of this. I'm sorry because I did this, and admitting that you're sorry doesn't mean that you're weak.
That's good.
Yeah, that pride is what gets you from being apologetic and stuff, And then you got people that are just apologetic for just looking at you. Oh, I'm sorry for looking at you, and you need to get out. People need to get out of that. And then when you say I'm sorry, mean it. It's not just words just coming out of your mouth freely.
Because sometimes saying you're sorry is very, very, very hard, especially if you feel like you were right in what you were saying, but you might have delivered it wrong. Like sometimes with us, if I feel like I was right in it, I might be saying, I'm sorry for how I said it to you, that it hurt you, this, that, and the other, but this is why I said what I said, and he'll do the same for me. I'm sorry that I said it in this harsher tone or whatever. But saying you're sorry, it can be very hard, but it's very freeing if you go ahead and do it.
Yes, that's good. And one thing that you said too, Audra, I wanted to kind of key off of was, take a moment. A lot of people think that, hey, a conflict has occurred, I need to address it right then. With my own children, that typically is the exact opposite time to try to resolve it. It's best to let it simmer, to write it down, my thoughts, let me cool down so I can come back and be more objective about it. And also, I'll make your point, I have found my kids, they'll listen to me the most when I'm apologizing to them for a mistake that I made. Because it makes me as the adult more human if they hear me say, hey, I really messed up. I'm going to work harder to make this better. And they really like that.
But it also gives them an example of how they need to conduct themselves in their situations, whether it's with their friends or if they did something wrong. Like with Zachariah, we used to have that issue where he didn't want to fess up if he did something. We knew he did it. He's the only person in the house. We know you did it. So now, by us saying we're sorry when we've messed up or when we've done something wrong, now he comes to us and be like, hey, I did this. I'm really sorry that I did this. I did this and I didn't think all of this the way through. So hopefully when he turns to age of adulthood, that'll keep him pushing towards the right direction. But a lot of times it's like, whew, the kids, you know, they really know how to push the buttons
Yep.
a lot of times because you've told them 50 times not to do that. And then they turn around and do what you just told them not to do. And then when it's messed up, then they come back to you and they're like, okay.
That's a good.
Deep breaths.
Well, so let's say someone watching has children or even grandchildren, and disagreement occurs. What are steps as a parent that a person can take to resolve a conflict?
It's almost the same thing as you would be in a work environment where you have to really sit down and listen. And I understand that it's harder to listen to the child because we are supposed to be the authoritarian figure and we're supposed to be the adult in the situation. But a lot of things that children are going through, they're going through way different stuff than when we were young people going through. So you really have to give them the time to listen. Also, what we've incorporated in our household, we're doing family meeting. So once a month or once every other month, we have a family meeting where we sit down and we just talk about stuff, you know, whether it's going on vacation or whether it's what's going on with school or whether, and it's a safe space. Whatever comes out in that meeting stays in that meeting. We don't go back and pick it back up and make people feel bad about what they had to say and what they had to share in the meeting. The first meeting was very, very hard. When you agree, people, I mean, we just blubbered and cried like, oh my God, this is so difficult. But as the meetings have gone on, Zachariah looks forward to them. We look forward to them where we can sit down and we can talk. No TV, no nothing. And we'll sit down and we'll talk. And we'll talk about the things that happened in our last meeting, things that, you know, we conduct it almost like it's a business and it's starting to work better for us, you know, so then whatever Zachariah has to say is in a safe environment, in a safe space, and we don't bring that back up to him anymore.
That is such a good idea. I think people can really take away from that idea. Emma, were you about to say something as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, also too, as a parent, you know, you have to be careful for what you ask for as well. You know, we pray for patience. You know, that child of yours is not a child; he's your teacher.
And that's the truth.
So
true.
You're the student, and the good Lord is just teaching you the patience. But you know, I see it that way, and I take it in stride that way. You know, sometimes it upsets me, but you know, it's just God. Just hey, you know what? You gotta. Here's your lesson.
Right. Well, last question for you. When conflict occurs, it is normal for people to feel a wide range of emotions. What suggestions do you have to help people better manage their emotions and their feelings?
Like for me, like I stated before, I have to step away. I have to. Because like I said, I'm a very passionate person about things. But in my younger management career, I was a hothead. I am not going to lie on this video. I was a hothead. I didn't want to listen. I felt like since I had my little college degree and since I had managed another little place before, I had got to this place that I just knew. And so I have to really take a step back and I have to take time to process and calm down. And even if I get upset with him or Zachariah or anybody, I have to say, look, I need a minute. I just need a minute, whether I have to go outside or whether if I have to take a drive or if I have to go to another room, because I don't like if I let stuff escalate past a certain point, because sometimes if you let stuff escalate, that you go and people think that fist and stuff like that hurt. That does hurt. Don't get me wrong, but words can hurt a lot longer than a bruise. It really can, because if you say something harsh to your spouse, then your spouse doubts. Or if you say something harsh to your child, then your child doubts. If you say something harsh in the workplace, then your manager looks at you like, I don't know if I'm going to bring that to Audra, because Audra may fly off the handle, or if I don't know if Audra can accomplish this task because it has some some complicated things in there and she can't handle it because she's a hothead. So
My family is perfect, Eric, and you know, I think that practicing
yes,
how to control and handle your emotions,
Mhm.
and starting with small stuff with your children,
Yep.
with your mother and father, with your brothers and sisters. That way, when that big conflict comes around with a stranger, you have a little more control, and you're not going at it. You're not letting it all free and loose. But like Audra says too, step away and then take some breaths and then think about what's going to happen. You know, but not every situation is like that. You know, I
Yeah.
found myself in a situation where I had a man yelling at me inside a gas station, and about I, I can't even remember what it was about, but he was just yelling and cussing and ranting up, and it threw me back. And you know, initially I wanted to yell back at him and say some
Lash out.
choice words to him.
Lash out. Mhm.
But something came over me. I took control and I calmed the situation down. And after it, we were outside of the gas station talking about it, and actually hugging and praying.
Okay.
So, you know, but it took a lot of practice. It took a lot of practice. It wasn't only with my nephew that we're raising. You know, with the man that worked for me as well. They also taught me how to control my emotions as well.
So,
And if you fly off the handle, don't keep beating yourself up about it.
Yeah.
Everybody's human. Everybody flies off the handle. Don't keep beating yourself up about it, because that can be a detrimental, the internal self-conflict. You're like, oh man, I handled this wrong. And so then you too conscious or too self-conscious to handle the next conflict to come up. And then you know, don't keep beating yourself up about it. Everybody flies off the handle. If you were genuinely sorry, you genuinely sorry. A lot of times the conflict is more internally with yourself than it is with somebody else.
Yeah.
So if don't keep beating yourself up about it. I mean, if you did something wrong, you know, talk about it, get help about it, but try to move on from it. Because the longer that you keep rehashing it, replaying it, redoing it in your mind, the bigger and insurmountable the conflict is the next time that you have to deal with it.
well said. Emmett and Audra Rodriguez, this has been great. Thank you for your wisdom on tips for resolving conflict at work and at home as well. Thank you both for joining us today. This has been great.
Thank you for having us.